what is it that I'm really trying to do? Okay? And I do want to get to something to show this inside as well. There is, I mentioned this before, there's a starting point that we all have in our approach to life, approach to any aspect of life, approach in Torah and so forth. We have a starting point. And we sometimes don't recognize what that starting point is. And that starting point may be a developed point. In other words, we've accepted something as a starting point that really is based upon certain assumptions and certain other concepts which need to be further investigated. And a lot of times people, when they start learning with Torah and stuff like that, they have a starting point, and people don't recognize that the starting point is that what they think is a starting point is itself subject to certain ideas, certain challenges. Let me give you an example. A lot of times people will come up to me, or a lot of times you see a situation where I, as a conservative rabbi, as an Orthodox rabbi, they'll come up to you and say, doesn't the Chumash say this and this and this? So how can you do this? Or something like that. And what people don't recognize, like they'll make a statement based upon a pasuk in Chumash and say, well, doesn't it say this? Doesn't it say that? And so forth. And don't you abide by that? And so forth. And the answer is I don't necessarily look at the Chumash text the way they look at the Chumash text. And I'll sit there and say, listen, what really was Revelation? Revelation may be more oral than it was written. I'll give you another example. Let's say a missionary comes up to you and says, doesn't the verse say A, B, C, D? Whatever, right? Doesn't it say in the verse A, B, C, D? And I'll look at them and say, so? Well, who cares what the verse says? And they'll sit there and say, well, don't you believe this is the Word of God? And I'll sit there and say, why? What do you believe? And then if I sit there and say, the truth is that I do believe it's the Word of God, but it was given with a specific addendum that was oral that insisted that the verse be understood a certain way. Therefore, it's a different starting point, and the person can't argue with you on that point, because the fact is they had a different starting point. Mm-hmm. They take the Chumash text as existing in a vacuum, and I take it as not existing in a vacuum. This is something that happens with a lot of concepts in Torah. In other words, people walk in, they go in concepts, and they might have concepts that they sort of figure about from their own mind and so forth and so on, like who is God and all these other things. And they don't necessarily understand they don't understand their starting point. And the point is to look at the starting point. Now, this happens in secular studies, by the way, where people will go back to a starting point. I'm reading two books right now. One is a book called Sapiens, which is by a professor of world history at Hebrew U. He's actually a Jewish guy, professor of world history at Hebrew U. the book is totally secular. It begins with evolution. The guy the author is not from, so he starts with a starting point and he says, okay, how did man develop? How did it develop? So he asks the questions of, when did man think there was something of community? How did man have a concept of love? How did man have a concept of bread? How did a man have... In other words, he sits there and says, how did things develop? And then he gets into issues by looking at the animal kingdom, says certain things are genetic, certain things aren't genetic. But he comes to some very interesting perceptions. Like, for example, he points out that the animal kingdom has groupings of communities that seems to be in the genes, where they have certain types of leadership and so forth and so forth, and it works for small groups. But what works for bigger groups, like to allow human beings to make groups that in the millions, human beings had to invent concepts, such as countries, such as, his example is companies, limited companies. Human beings had to invent concepts which are not real, such as a company is not real. He said by sharing these concepts, human beings were able to create communities. So he has this whole theory. I'm not arguing the correct, but he develops the theory step by step from the starting point. Another person who I'm looking at now is Freud in his book, what's the name of it, about civilization. And he argues this is how civilization developed, and so forth. The fact is, both these authors went back to the beginning and say, okay, where's the starting point? What's the original starting point? What happens a lot of times in the study of Torah, usually you're given some information and it's presented almost as a starting point without a recognition that the starting point itself is subject to further investigation. I'll give you another example of that in halachic terms. When was the Torah given?
Well, like the date?
Where, when?
Where it was in Har Sinai. Right?
Har Sinai, right? What was given in Har Sinai?
This idea, the transmission through Moshe
Of what?
Of the oral law and the written law.
Okay, the entire Torah?
The entire, well, yes.
The entire Torah was given at Sinai.
Well, yes.
Okay.
No, there's two parshas that weren't.
What two parshas?
Weren't there two? Where there was one parsha that wasn't added within.
You're mostly referring to the last lines of the Torah. Who wrote that? Yeshua wrote it, whatever. The point is that
through Moshe.
Okay, so but if you say that Yeshua wrote the last lines of the Torah, he didn't get in Har Sinai.
Right. No,
it's actually a machlokus in the Gemara. So there's machlokus in the Gemara of whether parshas were given throughout the Sinai experience, or whether the the whole Torah was given at Har Sinai, then somehow was broken up later on. I see, for example,
well, according to Rambam, there was everything that was given, and then
the Rambam doesn't really deal. In other words, when Rambam says you believe in Torah Sinai, he understands that Malchokus in the Gemara. He understands that when he's referring to Sinai is the revelation of Sinai, whether it was the entire Torah was given Har Sinai, or the entire Torah was given in the Sinai desert through Moshe Rabbeinu. The point is, it's not a different level of revelation. Like, for example, the story of the Bnei Selevan, right? And they come and ask Moshe a question. Well, if Moshe got the whole Torah at Har Sinai, did Moshe already read the fact that he was going to make it into Eretz Yisrael? Did he already read the fact about Bnei Selevan and so forth? So there's some people who say he received something, but the text was, garbled up. The question is what he received. Other people say he received parshas through the desert. Now that doesn't really make a big Nogei L'Maisa distinction in Halacha L'Maisa today, but it's a matter of what do we mean when we use to say the word Torah Sinai. To me, from from Har Sinai, what was given there, and so forth, or does it mean from the Sinai desert, and what's given there? The fact is that there's different perceptions and so forth. The fact is that happens a lot of times where you made statements but you don't really analyze it, and sometimes that analysis is really really has effects upon you. Okay? It really has effects upon you. Okay, now and this is something where what I'm really trying to bring up is the fact that things that you take for granted as starting points, what I'm trying to say, are they really the starting points? Okay? What are the starting points?
So what are the starting points?
So that's becomes the issue. So I brought in something very interesting. Well, it's not. It's actually what is a okay. I just want to give an example of what I mean by a starting point. Okay. Now, what I mean by a starting point is it's the fact you take something that is a pretty obvious starting point, but what really is the starting point? So here's an interesting aspect here. Okay, we're on this page. Then hey, what's this page here? This is from the Rambam. Okay, it's Hilchos Tshuva, Perek Gimel. Okay, Halacha Zayin. It's a famous Rambam and a famous writer. Okay. 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 So it's a famous Rambam and a famous writer. It says the Rambam says Chamisha Heimen Nikraim Minim. There are 5 people who are called Minim, which is a term for heretics. There's 5 types of heretics.
Isn't a min something like
a heretic?
Isn't there also something else that's a min? It's like something mythical or no?
No.
I think it's
here it means heretic.
Okay, fine.
Certain type of heretic, right? Okay. Okay. He says, okay, so he says, one is Omer Shein Shem Eloko, Bein Olam Manhig. One who says there's no God and there's no one who is supervising the world. That's one. Omer Shein Shem Manhig V'Elohim Shnayim or Yoser. One who says that there is someone who's guiding the world, a divine being, but there are 2 or 3 of them or more than them. Okay, and then Haomer Sheishan Ribon Echad, person who says there's only one God, Aval Shu Guf Ubal Tmuna, but he has a physical presence and he has a form. Okay, that's the third case. Then he goes on. He says. And then there's another one. Again, Omer Shein Levado Rishon with Sulko. Another one who says that he's not eternal. He's not the create. He's not the first cause, like the first persive. Okay, and it says Kena Oivid Koicha Mazos Lo Telohios Melit Beineo Ubein Ribon Haolam Kolech. Okay, or one who says is that there is an intermediary between man and God that you have to connect to. So those are the 5 medium. Now the one I want to focus on is the third one. Ha'omer she'esham ribun echad aval shehu guf ubal tumuna. It says someone says what?
Is that Jesus?
That would be something like that. Yeah. Someone who says that God has a physical presence. See, already you're getting into a simple assumption, because the Rambam says that Jews cannot believe that God has any physical presence. I mean, in Lo de Musavu, they know guf. He doesn't have a physical body. That's a basic belief of the Rambam. The Rambam is very adamant about it, right? It's one of the Gimli Karma of the Rambam, and there's reasons for it. The basic reason for it is because the Rambam believes in the unity of God. Not just that God is one, but God is echad. Echad just doesn't mean one; it means God is unitary. He is of oneness. And guf, the physical realm, is by definition cannot be one one simple unit. Okay, this plate, yeah, it's one plate, but it's made up of molecules.
Right.
The idea of God not having a body means that He doesn't have, He is not the combination of different parts. Okay, He is one, and that's aspect of it. Okay, but He says here that and this is basically fundamental principle of Judaism. It's part of the Gimel Ikarim, okay, it's clear cut, so forth, and within Orthodox Judaism today, that's basic belief. The Ravid, okay, so if you look over here, okay, over here to the side, the Ravid says, Omer sheyesham ribon echad el shuguf baltmuna. Says someone who says that there's one God, but he has a physical presence. Okay, that the Rambam holds is the person who says it is a min. Avram Omer, b'lama kara lazeh min. How can the Rambam call such a person a min, a heretic? Why? V'kama gedolim v'tovim mimenu. There are many great people, greater than us, okay, and better than us. Okay, halcha bezu hamachshava, accepted this thought. Okay, there are people who accept that God did have a physical presence.
Talking about Kabbalists?
What? What?
Like Kabbalists?
That's too specific. The fact is there are people who believe that God had some type of physical presence. What that physical presence is, I don't know.
Yeah.
The truth is, you find that among some Kabbalists, but it's not really physical presence, because the Kabbalists today don't want to have a machlokus of the Rambam. There's an issue of true Rambam scholars who will argue the Kabbalists don't really share the Ikarim of the Rambam. But the point is to argue that God has a physical dimension is really outside of the pale of most orthodoxy. But there have been people in history who are counted within the Orthodox world who did believe that God had some type of physical presence, whatever that means. Okay? Okay? This is not a physical presence like our physical presence. He doesn't necessarily have a body like we have a body, but he had something which is some aspect of physical. And all the writer is saying is there are people greater than us. He says, how can you call such a person a man? Like, I understand you disagreeing with this person, and the writer himself is not saying he's disagreeing with the Rambam. The writer most likely agreed with the Rambam. Some people say the writer really agreed with the Rambam. The writer is just saying you can't call this person a heretic.
He believes in something.
Because he believes in it. Now why? It's like, look at the next thing. Why? Because the masharo b'makros. Okay? Because of what they saw in verses.
Makros are like psukim?
Psukim. Yad Hashem. Things like that. Yoter mimasharo b'divrei Haggadah. Okay, Moshe says there.
What's Yad Hashem? Yad Hashem is a sefer on.
No. I'm just saying Yad Hashem. The Yad. Yad Hashem is, we find that term by.
Okay.
Yad Hashem.
You have okay, perfect.
Is it right?
Yeah.
By the Makot.
Okay.
And he says over there, and not only that, what they saw in Divrei Haggadah, okay, Hamashbosas Adeas, who sometimes present viewpoints in a little bit of a different way. But if you look at the Aggadahs talk about God.
Stories.
The Aggadahs in Gemara.
Right.
They're not to be taken. Those are essential. You have to understand, according to the Rambam, you're also talking about emotions. This is where you go more into the Kabbalistic idea.
Right.
Because the Rambam told us emotions are really physical. Okay, the emotions are part of the physical realm. Okay, so the point is...
You're talking about chemistry?
What?
When the Rambam says emotions are physical, what's he talking about?
He considers emotions to... Not just because of chemistry, he's considering emotions... Because I don't know if the Rambam knew anything about emotions coming from our hormones or whatever. I don't know what his level of scientific knowledge was back then. But the fact is when we talk about emotions, the problem with emotions is that emotions represent a split in our being. In other words, when God says, when the Rambam holds that God doesn't have emotions, is because when you're angry, you're different than when you are happy. You're different than when you are in a good mood or whatever. In other words, the fact is that within our personality, we have many different parts of that personality. How are you today? I'm kind of tired. How are you today? I'm in a bad mood. I'm in a good mood. That represents a split in our being. The idea of God being one means that God does not have what shifts in. Lights on?
Your battery's dying.
Oh, but the light's on, right?
Yeah.
Okay. It means that we're not in a we are talking about the split of our personality. The God is always the same, so He doesn't shift between emotions. So the point is that emotions being tied to God is usually considered to be a tying physical nature to God. So whenever you see a verse that says God's angry or something like that, the Rambam has an idea. You have to understand, it doesn't mean God's really angry. It means in that situation we would perceive it as anger, but it's not really angry. But the fact is the Rambam wants to maintain a consistency. There are certain viewpoints of people who would say that God did have some level of these emotions, whatever, and it's physical. But the point is, he says there are people who say that Gedolim Yimenu. He's not saying he's in agreement with them. The vast majority of scholars within Torah maintain the Rambam's viewpoint that God does not have a physical presence. However, there were some people who did, and all the Rabbi is saying is those people who did totally disagree with them, but you can't call him a heretic. Now, he makes an interesting statement why you can't call him a heretic. Why can't you call him a heretic? Because they have psukim and agaritas that they seem to find in support. Okay? Now, what is the Rabbi really saying with that? Look at the language of the Rabbi.
So is he saying that Stuki is in the heretic?
What? No, Stuki is not in this situation. What does Stuki have to say? So what's the Stuki's position on this?
No, I mean the idea that if you can see some sort of way to derive it from a pasuk,
or
then
that's what he says.
Then you wouldn't be considered.
But what does he say? The yoter mizeh, and even more so, from a gadita, from divrei Chazal. So the truth is, you're asking a very good question on that regard. But he says, no, it's not just from a heretic. A person who only accepts the text as the basis of revelation is a heretic. But people who accept Torah Shebechtav and Torah Sheba'al Peh, but come to a realization that God has some kind of physical presence, that's not a heretic. So what is he really saying? He's saying that the fundamental faith, the fundamental aspect of faith, is the acceptance of the revelation of Torah Sheba'al Peh and Torah Shebechtav.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, misunderstandings of Torah Sheba'al Peh and Torah Shebechtav doesn't make you a heretic. Now, that's a remarkable statement.
Yeah.
Because what he's saying is, what's the starting point?
The starting point is accepting revelation.
So the point is that.
So according to who? The Taz?
The Rabbi.
So the Rabbi.
Right. So the point is that the Rambam is saying that if you misread the Divrei Chazal or the Psukim to accept that God has a physical presence, you are a heretic. So the Rambam is disagreeing with that. He's saying misinterpretation of the text in the Masorah, right, can still make you a heretic.
Can we review that one more time?
Yeah. What do you want to read? What one side? The Ravid?
Yeah. On the Rambam.
Well, the Rambam is. I'm just reading Chamisha the Karaim Binim.
Okay.
Skip down. It says, "Haomer sheyesh sham ribun echad." One that says that there's one master, one God. Aval shu guf ubal tmuna, but he has a body, he has something physical, and he has a form.
Tmuna is form?
Yeah, Bal Tmuna means a tmuna, a picture. You know,
Okay.
he has a form, right? Now, what I mean by, the truth is that I'm not using that term like, the philosophers talk about form and substance and so forth. And form, and when you're talking philosophical terms, they talk form and substance. Form is much more the spiritual realm or something like that. But he's basically saying that you think that God has a form in terms of a physical form. Okay, which is what a tmuna is. Okay. Now the Rabbi says, he says, Lama krara min. Why does he call this person a heretic? The fact that he disagrees, it's totally acceptable he disagrees. In fact, it's quite possible the Rabbi would agree with the Rambam and also disagree that God has with the idea that God has a physical. But there are a few examples of certain Rishonim who did have it. I don't want to mention names right now, but have seen that people refer to certain Rishonim and not having it. But the fact is more minor Rishonim. I mean, we call them minor Rishonim, they're still Rishonim, but the fact is that you're talking about a minority opinion within Jewish thought. But he's saying, I wouldn't call this person a man. Okay, and he says, why do we call him? But kalam kama gedolim v'tov mimenu. There are a number of people greater and better than us meaning him and the Rambam. Okay, chalchu b'zua machshava, had this thought. Okay, the fi masha ra'u b'mikros, pursuant to what they saw in verses, the yoter, and even more so, mimasha ra'u b'divrei hagadot. Okay, what they saw in the words of the Agadata. Shpach is there that create the interplay of thought. But the fact that what he's saying is, saying that nicely. But the fact is what he's saying is that people relying upon these sources came up with these conclusions. And a person who's relying upon these sources, okay, if they come up to a conclusion with these sources, that doesn't necessarily mean that their conclusions define them as heretic. They can be wrong. I could disagree with their conclusions.
But, so then does that mean that... So is it...
So
according to the Ravid, he would say that you have to start with the idea of belief in the Torah of Moshe Sinai, and then Torah, and then the Torah Shabbat, Torah Shabbat, and then once you play around with it, then because you already have that initial belief, that's the starting point. So therefore, if someone comes along and argues with that starting point, does that take away? So it says no, that's not where you start from, I guess. And the Rambam, what's the Rambam stance?
Okay, so that's a good question. What's the Rambam starting point? So the Rambam starting point seems to be, he also would agree with the Ravid that the starting point has to be Torah Sinai, right? But because he says that one of the Ikarim is accepting that there was a Torah given on Har Sinai.
So his
Torah Shabbat and Torah Sheba'al Peh. He has another starting point. What's his other starting point?
Is it inclusive, or is it? It's not step by step. It's inclusive.
Yeah, because he's.
So if you have all these Yud Gimel Ikrim and you're missing one, you're a heretic.
Well, if you're missing one of the 13, for sure, according to the Rambam,
you're a min.
Well, min is a technical term. What he says when he describes it is you're outside the definition of a Torah Jew. I mean, he has different definitions of different types of heretics. Aminim, Apikurim, something like this. But the fact of the matter is what he says in terms of the Gimel Karim, is the Gimel Karim basically state, listen, if you are a person who does averas, like what the Yigimel Karim come from is says Kol Yisrael Yeshem Chelek Olam Haba. All Jews have a place in Olam Haba, and he's talking about Jewish identity and being what I would call a well, his term is kofar, a person who is a citizen in good standing within the Jewish people. Now we have to take into account that Rambam also develops the concept of Tinuk Nishma in terms of culpability in not being a person, a citizen in good standing. So if you're a man, okay, for example, he talks about the Karaites, the example you gave in terms of the Sugim Karaites, he says, I don't know if he uses the term men over there, but the fact is, he says over there, he says in Hilchos Mamrim that the children of people who were brought up by with outside the parameters of orthodoxy, outside the Yud Gimel Ikarim, like someone who was brought up believing that only Torah Shebechtav was from Sinai and not Torah Shebal Peh. He says that kid, that child is considered to be a Tinuk Shenishba, and is not culpable for having incorrect beliefs. Okay? But a person who is culpable for having incorrect beliefs, he says basically that person is not a citizen in good standing within the Jewish people. Okay?
How does someone have proper beliefs nowadays?
Yeah, okay. Okay, so the point is,
or any.
Okay. The point is, let's get back. Let's not ask.
Right.
Let's talk what the Rambam is saying here. There is the Rambam when the Rambam presents the Gimel Karim, the 13 Principles of Faith, which he basically does in his commentary on the Mishnah, on Perek Chelek in Sanhedrin. Okay, Perek Chelek is in the Mishnah the last parak in Sanhedrin, and it begins Kol Yisrael Yeshem Chelek Olam Haba. All Jews have a section of the world to come, and he opens up by talking about in his Parish Rishayis he talks about this, and he talks about really what he defines in certain aspects of Jewish identity. There's a person who's Jewish, born to a Jewish mother, stuff like that. But the Rambam then goes on to say that there is a definition of what you would call, let's say, a citizen in good standing and a citizen not in good standing. There's a Jew in good standing and a Jew not in good standing. In terms of fundamental part of the group.
So
he says that the person who does averas, because we say Yisrael Asher Afal Pi Shechote Yisraelhu. It says a Jew who even though he sins is still a Jew. The Rambam says that a person who sins, he eats treif, he's Machal Shabbos, but believes in the Ikarim, still is fundamentally a Jew in good standing, good Jewish citizen. Okay, a Jew who does not believe in the Gimel Ikarim, okay, he says that is a Jew not in good standing. Now, that's in terms of his ideas. But then he goes on to say that those ideas mean he's not in good standing. But is he culpable for having those ideas? So the Rambam makes a distinction between being culpable and not culpable. And it's very hard to say that anyone today is so culpable for being a Jew not in good standing because he doesn't abide by the Ikarim, to say that he's actually culpable for it. Now, what do I mean by culpable for it? So the Rambam says that a Jew who doesn't accept the Gimel Ikarim, the Rambam says mitzvah l'tzono. There's a mitzvah at the end of the Ikarim. He says you have a mitzvah to hate for such a person. Okay, now that would mean we have a mitzvah to hate most of Klal Yisrael? No, because most Jews today are not deemed to be culpable. Okay, but their beliefs are outside the pale of orthodoxy, and that's what we mean by a min. Okay, or not because so the beliefs are outside the pale. So he's saying that what the Rabbi, he's basically agreeing with the Rabbi in theory, that just because you disagree on certain principles doesn't mean that person is a heretic. It's something you disagree with, okay. But he's still within the pale. Now, but there's certain things that if you disagree with, you're outside the pale. The Rabbi is going to say a Saduki, a Karaite is outside the pale. The Karaite belief is an unacceptable belief within Orthodox Judaism. However, does that mean the person's culpable? No. He's a Tinnik Shenishba. Okay. He's considered to be, a person who's not culpable for his lack of knowledge or whatever. Now, the Rambam is saying that a person who has the belief that God has a physical presence, that's not even in the discussion here. Of course that person's within the pale. You disagree with him, but he's within the pale. What you're asking is, the Rambam, though, is saying something different. What you're saying, what's the starting point of the Rambam?
Right.
So one of the starting points of the Rambam is obviously that you have Torah Sinai. Okay? That you believe in Revelation.
It's not just one,
okay.
It's like a bunch.
What? Yes. The Ravid also has other ones.
Yeah.
Okay, the Ravid doesn't disagree about the other definitions.
So it's not like 1 out of 3, you're not a man.
No, the fact of the matter is that whatever are the necessary factors for belief in Orthodox Judaism, the Rambam has 13. Other people have different numbers. Right. The Ravid is just saying, take out this one, but that doesn't mean he disagrees with the other one. Mm-hmm. The other ones he may totally agree with that person is outside the pale. Right. Now the point is that the Rambam, what does he say? So he says, if you don't believe that God has a physical presence, you're outside the pale. Right. Okay, so what's his starting point? Well, it's from the sources. But wait a sec. The Rambam says, because this is how you have to learn the sources. Mm-hmm. The Rabbi is saying, well, there's other ways of reading the sources, and people bigger than us have read the sources a different way. So how can you read the sources differently? Mm-hmm. So the Rambam is saying that there's another standard. So what's the Rambam's other standard? Okay? That becomes a very interesting issue. Mm-hmm. Now, some people say the Rambam's other standard is basically reason. That the Rambam basically maintain the views of the philosophers. Mm-hmm. That the philosophers basically argued that God did not have a physical being, and that it's incumbent in our understanding of Torah, okay, to use reason. Mm-hmm. Okay, and to use the factors that the philosophers have applied in trying to understand the divine. So the Rambam would say that part of the fundamental principles of Torah is that you still have to have a philosophical bent. Mm-hmm. You still have to have reason. So if you're called upon in Torah, Torah is not going to call upon you to believe something which is unreasonable. You have to work it out. So if if you read the pasuk that says, so the Rambam would say, if you read this pasuk to say that God doesn't has a physical being, which contradicts reason and understanding of perfection of God from a reasonable perspective, mm-hmm. he would sit there and say, that's not a correct way of understanding the psukim. So psukim have to be understood through the perspective of reason. Mm-hmm. What the Rabbi is basically saying is that, yeah, you have to think and so forth, but he's basically maybe arguing that the reason that's accepted within the philosophical model, yeah. Maybe we're not so bound to that reason. Okay? Gets into issues of logic and so forth and so forth. Now you see this in terms of the Rambam and his attitude. For example, the Rambam said there's an issue where you say, for example, Aristotle believed in the eternity of the universe. Mm-hmm. Okay? That the universe was not created. And the Rambam says if Aristotle would have proved it, right, he would have to understand, he would have to read Bereshit. This is what he says in the Moreh Nevuchim. Okay? Because you can't, if he would have proved it from reason, then he would have to reread Bereshit.
But isn't that like saying if you prove that Santa Claus is real, you have to believe in Santa Claus?
if you can prove Santa Claus is real, why wouldn't you believe in Santa Claus?
Right. So what I'm saying is he felt so highly of Aristotle that it was...
No, he was arguing that he felt very strongly about reason. Now, let me take the extreme other example.
What do you say about modern science? That kind of like...
So that's part of the issue. So the fact is that...
biology.
Yes, so the fact is, Rabbi would say, yes. It becomes a real issue. Now, but you have to put this in perspective. That one of the aspects of Christianity in terms of the concept of faith is to believe in something that is incomprehensible. That's where you had that famous statement by one of the church fathers, credo que absurdum est. I believe because it is absurd. In other words, what I'm saying is I have to... Smile?
Yes.
Okay. I have to believe. I believe because it is absurd. In other words, belief is believing in something which is unreasonable. Now, this actually ties into certain aspects. Not really in terms of Christianity and so forth and so forth, but one of the challenges of Christianity is the belief in something which is beyond reason, because they understand that reason can make man into being haughty and think so high of himself because he's thoughtful and so forth and so forth. So one of the challenges of Christian faith is to believe in something that makes you not so haughty by being so reasonable. But then the Rambam is the extreme of the view within Judaism that says, listen, God doesn't call upon us to accept something which is unreasonable. Okay, and the reason, but you see, what I'm getting into now is matters of what are the starting points.
Right.
Okay, and there's other like like when you have there are people, let's say arguments. Does the sun go around the moon? Sun go around the earth, or the earth go around the sun? So there are people. I don't mention names, but there are people who are recognized as Gedolim, whatever, and I'm not going to. They are. I mean, they're big people. Gedolim v'tovim imenu, who said that you can't. That you have to believe the sun has to go around. It goes around the earth. Why? Because that's what state in Pasuk. Okay, and they quote the Pasuk Yeshua, the sun stood still, and so forth. So that tells you that we are called upon to believe that the sun goes around the earth. Okay. Now, the Rabbi says, listen, someone who believes the sun goes around the earth, I can disagree with them. They have a pasuk to go on.
Right.
Okay? What the Rambam would say is, wait a second. All the study of science has shown not like that. So you can't. You can't be so. Well, he's not going to put him in the category of minimum. So he would sit there and say, you have to reread the pasuk in line with science. And he would sit there and say, and the other argument is, Torah b'lashon b'nei Adam. The Torah speaks in the language of man. So it says the sun stood still. Really, what it meant is that the earth stopped moving around the sun. But the fact is that it looked like the sun, like it was the sun that stood still. But the point is that this is just a statement of what we perceive. But you have to understand the pasuk to be in line with science. That would be much more the Rambam's viewpoint. Okay. Now, sometimes we don't have answers. Sometimes it seems we have steerers and so forth. So we sit there and say, listen, we don't understand the pasuk. We don't understand, things like that. But the fact is that here's an example of a starting point. What is that starting point? The starting point is revelation, and the starting point is there's a starting point called pre-revelation. How do you approach revelation? The Rambam is saying that when you approach revelation, reason is part of what's necessary in approaching revelation. Okay, like I point out to people that when the Klal Yisrael got Torah, they weren't like young babes getting Torah. The nation already existed for many years. They had the experience of Egypt. They were also the Bnei Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. They had a history. Okay, so the fact is when they came to Torah, God didn't just go up to Avraham and say, okay, I'm going to give you Torah now. he waited to develop Am Yisrael. It was Am Yisrael that accepted Torah. So the truth is that Am Yisrael in accepting Torah had to be in a certain state, which means that revelation had to have a pre-revelation to bring the recipients of revelation to a certain point in accepting revelation. And when we study the Torah before Har Sinai, we're understanding the mindset in the acceptance of Torah. Now this is all part of what we mean. What is the starting point? What's the starting point? There's a starting point when you like when a person tells you halacha, are you supposed to ask the question why or not? So some people say, no, we don't ask why. And other people say, yeah, why it's a good thing. The point is that there are so many issues on the starting point that happens along the way. And in a lot of ways we get ideas and we don't necessarily know our starting points. So
where do we find our starting points?
That's what we have to investigate. That's what we have to investigate.
So according to the Rabbi, we have a starting point. According to the Rambam, we have a starting point.
Right. So the fact is there may be different starting points. The point that we have to do, that you have to do is, or what I'm trying to get across in a lot of these shiurim is for you to recognize the variant starting points, because one of the problems is, I'm not going to argue which is right and wrong right now, which is the better starting point. But obviously, I have my own. I can tell you that the view of the Rambam in this regard, on this particular issue, is the vastly accepted view of. That would be the view of Klal Yisrael today.
Right.
Okay, that God does not have a physical presence. But the point is that that's just one example of starting points. But the point is, in almost any statement you make, right? How often do you look at it and say, okay, what's really my assumption?
Right.
What am I really thinking?
Right.
Okay. What do I really think is the fundamental principle I'm accepting here? And let me go from there. Okay. So when you hear people talk halacha this or halacha that, fact is what exactly is your what are your assumptions, what are your understandings, and so forth, and like I'll see someone point out, they'll come and say, here's the halacha, and they'll say like this, and they'll show you the Mishnah Berurah. I'll say, you see, that's the final law. Okay, you're assuming we have to follow the Mishnah Berurah.
Right.
Many other possibilities out there. Maybe other people don't hold like that.
Sure, Rabbi.
Okay, what?
Sure.
Okay. So that's what I wanted to deal with, and that's what I want to get more into in terms of starting points.